Jiggy. Ah. And with our story mode, what are we going to wear? We wear our famous hats. Our infamous hat. Right? My favorite. The storytelling hat. Right, Tails? Tell them, Tails. Say, these are mean, bad old people. That's better. Always did like a good straw hat. Okay, so here it's story time now. Here we go. So, once upon a time. I just love those once upon a times, don't you? Once upon a time, there was a village. And in this village, there lived several well-organized individuals. When I mean well-organized, I mean well-organized, okay? See, they had the village people, the village idiot. I mean, they had like little families, little houses, a little itty-bitty tiny village. As small as you could think of. Then there was a council that every village had their own little council. They had 3 men. 1, 2, 3. And they're always the most knowledgeable, the most wisest, and the leaders of the entire village. They were even the priests of whatever. They were the top of the top people that people would go to for advice, or they would go to them for prayers for their family, or they would go to them for simple tasks that they couldn't handle in their life scenarios. They would go to them just because, and they were considered the top 3, the 3 old men. Now the 3 old men in this village, well, they outlived themselves, and they were seeking to find another one to replace the other man, the old man that's about to pass away. Because there's supposed to be 3, and now there will be 2 soon. So, with one of the old, wiser men that were already ill and old, and on their last limb said, "This is a good idea. I need a replacement. We must have 3 of us." So the old men got together in their little tiny house, and they had their conversation. They said they must pass the challenges before we can accept them as one of ours. Because they don't pass the challenges or the tests, well, they're not going to make it. They're not going to be the wise one. They're not going to give the best rule in the village. So it was said, and the word was out. They're looking for another ruling leader in their pack of 3. So one man, there was a line all of a sudden to the door of the old wise people's house. And they all were lined up, waiting their turn to see if they would pass the test. Now the first man went in there, and he says, "What do I do to have to pass the test?" And they told them, the first man that walked in, "There are 3 things you must do. 1, you must be able to hunt without a weapon. That would be your first task. 2, you must be knowledgeable of every landscape, every land, and every book that is written. 3, you must prove your own strength. by lifting something very, very heavy. So he said, I guess I can do that. So the old 3 wise men were in there, and the old men, they said, okay, so one of them walked out and they said, the rest of you leave. We only need one to test at a time. This will take some time. So everybody scrambled and left. Went home to their families. And the man that actually was the first one in there said, okay, let him give me the test. He said, okay, remember, the first thing you need to do is fight without a weapon. Capture me, a wolf in the woods, without a weapon. And that will be your challenge to do to pass the test. Yes, and he said, very well. So he walked out of the village to the edge of the woods, armed nothing, with only his clothing, and that's it. So he walked out. He said, I'll be back in 2 days' time. So the old men walked back in their little hut and closed the door. At this point, they needed somebody to follow him to make sure he did what he had said. So one of the old men called out to one of the villagers and said, hey, follow him. Make sure he does what he says he does without a weapon. So we know for a fact that he did what his challenge was. And it was a young boy, I say young boy, I guess, followed him. It was the easiest way. It was the youngest ones to follow the older one. So the man is now in the woods and only in his clothing, and the other one is following about way behind, but able to still see. The man goes to a tree and he starts gathering everything. He gathers a bunch of sticks, a whole bunch of them, starts putting them together with vines and making a big giant box. Now remember, he couldn't use weapons, but didn't say anything about any traps. So the man put up this trap with a stick in a big caged box, but on top of this thing that's holding open the cage is a big rock, a heavy rock that's going over a tree limb just to hold it up enough so that when a thing comes down on him and he pulls it, the big rock will fall on top of the trap and the wolf won't be able to escape because wolves are strong. And that's when he was able to handle and grab him, his wolf, from the first challenge. And as this is happening, the little young man over there is still watching in the distance. But he doesn't know he's there. So he builds this thing. He sets it up. And he climbs up to the top of the tree. And he waits. And in the meantime process, he puts berries, he didn't think about this. He thought this through. Because remember, he went out here with only his clothing. He thought this thoroughly, though. So he actually had to catch some fish, put them under there and stuff with, bare hands, making a homemade whatever, getting some fish and putting it underneath there. And he waited in the nighttime. And then he hears a bunch of footprints. But then there's a pack of wolves about to show up. But how is he going to get one of them out of all of them? I mean, surely there's got to be a way to separate them. So he decided that he was going to just wait and see what happens. So all the wolves start walking towards him. And this tree that has the trap with the fish underneath it. And the wolf, the biggest one, sees it. And they start fighting over this food. So the biggest one obviously wins and gets the first piece. So the wolf walks up and the rest of the wolves just scatter, go to like the river and start drinking water, things like that. And in the meantime, as his herd was dispersed along the areas, the big wolf went underneath the big box and he slammed on the leaves that he built the rope out of, and it closed the box on top of the wolf with the rock on it. And at that time, he had nothing but a big giant boulder to hold it down. And he didn't know how he was going to conquer bringing a wolf underneath this crate box. And he had nothing to kill it with. So he thought about it, and he had an idea. He shivered out stick long enough, hopefully, to kill the wolf and bring it back to the three old men. So that was his plan. His plan came out very well. So he ended up lifting the box very frightfully, getting rid of the wolf, and ending it. In the meantime, all the other wolves notice that something's going on. They start dispersing and going in that same direction as they hear the wolf getting destroyed. So the man drives up to the tree and he sits there and he waits. He's waiting. Because all the little wolves that didn't get any of the food see the wolf dead on the ground with the fish not eaten. But they take the fish, howl, and say goodbyes and leave with the rest of the pack. Morning came around. This time the man got out of the tree, he grabbed his wolf, and he walked and dragged it all the way back to the village. And he came up to the three old men in their home, and they put it in front of his door and knocked. And one man opened the door. He slipped at his feet, and there was a giant wolf. He's like, I believe you might have passed the test. Okay. And he said, well, what's my second one? And this time, the challenge was simple. So it seemed. You must make the village love you. That seemed so simple, but yet so tasking. So he began. The old men said, you have 1 week. So every day when he went home, he got up and made time throughout his day to help people in their houses, their farms. He helped them with their food, feeding the cattle, taking care of their farm animals, etc., for the entire week. Made friends, talked with the villagers, everything you can think of to make friends with everything in there. And by the end of the week came around, he went back to the three men, the old men, and he went in there and he said, I think I accomplished what you had asked. I had befriended everybody in the village and made sure to help everybody that needed the help they needed. Did I pass? He looked at him and he said, you pass. Then the third trial came along. The third one seemed easy too. All you had to do was lift a huge boulder and put it, and be able to pick it up. There you go. Just be able to pick up this very large boulder, heavier than you are. He thought maybe this might be a challenge. So I have to lift a boulder in the air. And I am not strong as this boulder. I'm weaker than the boulder. I'm smaller. Then he came up with an idea. He said to the three wise men, he says, all I have to do is lift this giant boulder off the ground and I'll pass. And they all looked. Go for it. And he came up with this. Very well. He walked up to the edge of the forest and he grabbed a big, giant log, half a log, not even. It's big, but he brought it up there. And he brought another piece of a log up there with him. It must have been about that thick, not that long, maybe a couple feet long. Brought two of them up there. Hello. God, the name. Sorry. Okay. I'm just telling the story. Sorry. And, okay, so he had these two giant sticks. And one of them he placed underneath the big giant boulder. Well, he had three of them. Yeah, three big sticks. And then the other one, he placed it on the other side of the boulder. Well, close to each other, really like this, basically. And on the third stick, he had placed across it on two of the sticks that he placed and shoved underneath this big boulder. And he says, okay, this is it. They were big sticks. They weren't going to break with this boulder. So the man stood on top of the giant stick that was supposed to be hoshed down on top of these two other ones that were cornered. And he pulled very hard. And the boulder lifted itself up from the sticks of the pushing, lifted it up, and then it dropped. Then he turned and he looked at the three old men and he says, I lifted your boulder. Do I pass your test? And the three old men looked at him and walked straight up to him and said, no, you didn't pass the test. And I said, he was confused. He did everything that they said. Everything. He even caught the big giant wolf. He helped all the villagers and made them their friends. And then he lifted the giant boulder. Even though he didn't do it with his own hands, he still used something and he lifted the boulder. And he said, that wasn't the point, said the old man. The point of it was that you would lift the entire boulder yourself, not use something else to do it for you. And he was kind of disappointed. So he said, very well then. And I wasn't your one. And he turned and he walked. And the moral of that story is, even if the man couldn't lift up the boulder, or he couldn't go into the woods to use tools, he still got the wolf. And even though he couldn't make any friends or talk to people out there in general, and he was always a big shy person, and he made all those friends, doesn't matter, and everybody he helped, it didn't matter. And he used the tools to lift it. Well, the point is, it shouldn't matter what you use to get the job accomplished, as long as it was done. Correct. That hat. I swear. What's the storytelling hat? The end. Have a good day. Maybe.